In our family, it was always believed that everything was perfect. The perfect home, perfect holidays, perfect us. Then I found out that my brother wasn't just the favorite. He was the one who dragged us all into the shadow of his dirty secrets. The saintly smile of Tom turned out to be something much more vile. And if you think you know what family secrets are, you'd better buckle up. My name is Alex. I'm 25. Life was finally starting to even out. Not that I'd become a billionaire or anything, but at least everything was more or less going according to plan. I was handling my business, things seemed to be under control, and then, bam! My older brother, Tom. He's 27, and of course the golden boy of the family, the walking success as Mom loves to say at every family dinner. The good-looking one with that commercial-worthy smile our old dog probably even misses when he's not around. He's the type who shows up at family gatherings looking like some kind of perfect son. Really, Tom, leave some oxygen for us ordinary mortals. But there's always been something off behind that whole facade. The role model, the paragon, the friendly charming guy. Yeah, those shiny templates. And at the last family gathering for Dad's birthday, something weird happened. I accidentally overheard Tom's phone conversation. Nothing too crazy. We all eavesdrop once in a while, especially when the conversation sounds like a trailer for some crime thriller. His voice was low, tense, and I clearly heard words about money and some kind of debt. Let's just say my curiosity was more awake than ever at that point. A couple of days later, I managed to catch Tom alone. I set up a chance meeting at a cafe. You know, just popping in for coffee and, oh, look who's here. I was casual, just decided to join him. Outwardly, he was the same. Confident, laid back, with that signature smile that makes everyone think he's practically a saint. But I already knew something was lurking behind that perfect son mask. Hey, Tom, so what's up with these debts of yours? I asked casually, like I was just talking about the weather. He looked at me for a good 5 seconds, and then, miracle of miracles, his expression slipped a bit. For a second, he looked like he'd been caught. But in the blink of an eye, he regained his composure, winked, and answered with a calm smile. Dude, I was just joking with a friend. Relax. And then, almost as if on purpose, he added, You're overthinking it. I've got everything under control, as always. Anyone else in his place might have thought I believed him. But sorry, his smile didn't cut it for me anymore. I felt a pang inside. My gut was screaming that this guy was hiding something. The friendly guy from the family commercials was starting to seem slimy, like his story had more holes than an old t-shirt. So yeah, I decided to dig a little deeper. The next day, I'd just woken up when I got a message from Laura. Yeah, that Laura, who's been with us since school and who, as always, knows all the news before anyone else. The message was marked as urgent, and the text started with, You won't believe this, but... How could I not open it right away? I read it, and I almost dropped my coffee. Turns out Laura had received an anonymous tip. A letter that said our dear brother Tom was involved in some shady dealings. But that wasn't even the worst part. It also said he was supposedly blackmailing someone from his company. My beloved, perfect brother, the golden child, who apparently decided to play the role of a movie villain. Are you kidding me? I thought, nearly saying it out loud. Of course, Laura told me with caution, as if I'd be scared or wouldn't believe her. She was obviously uncomfortable about the whole thing, and you could tell she didn't want to get involved. But now it was too late. So I decided. There was no point in waiting. I had to get to the bottom of this right away, while the information was still fresh. I met with Tom a little later, and without mincing words, I said, Listen, I've heard that maybe you're not as squeaky clean as everyone thinks. Sounds like you've got bigger problems than you've been letting on. His face went blank, but he quickly managed to put on his $1,000,000 smile. Think he's going to brush me off like an annoying fly? Not happening. When I pressed him a little harder, he finally broke. He admitted that, yeah, he had necessary connections, people, and it was all to help him pay off some debts. According to him, it was just deals that didn't hurt anyone. He claimed he had no choice. Right, like he just happened to bump into some shady characters on his way to buy bread and decided, well, I guess that's my destiny. And that's when everything flipped upside down inside me. Standing in front of me wasn't my brother. It was someone else, reckless and cold. I wanted to trust him, but that conversation pulled the ground right out from under my feet. After that confession, as you can guess, my life was never the same. Here was my older brother, the one who was supposed to be my role model, and he turned out to be nothing like the person he pretended to be. I thought maybe it was just a few minor slip-ups. We all have those, right? But it turned out to be so much worse than I ever could have imagined. Have you ever felt like the ground was just slipping out from under you? That's how I felt as I started digging deeper into this. It turned out that our noble Tom wasn't just a little in debt. No, he was running a full-blown criminal startup. Fraud, extortion, and that was just the beginning. He was mixed up in schemes so dark, they made mob movies look like children's shows. People were getting hurt because of him, and this was far from some prank you could just overlook. Every time I learned something new, I thought I'd hit rock bottom, but the hole just kept getting deeper. Honestly, how did he even manage to hide all this? A guy who's always in the spotlight, always polite, always setting a good example. As one of our mutual friends put it, "Dude, is he even a real person, or just a master of double dealing?" And with every passing day, I kept thinking that our good old Tom was just a master of illusions. For me, family was always a fortress. I really believed that everything in our family was honest, that everyone had everything under control. But after all these details came out, I started having trust issues with everyone. How could I look at my family and believe that everything was okay? Who else was hiding something? At some point, I just sat there thinking, what the hell am I supposed to do now? I couldn't just sit back and pretend everything was fine. Tom, with all his shady business, had turned into a stranger to me. After a while, our parents started to suspect something. Not surprising. I was practically avoiding Tom like he had the plague. At family gatherings, I kept my distance, leaving the room whenever he walked in, if I could. Naturally, Mom noticed. So, when we were all together for dinner, she decided to go on the offensive. "Alex, honey, you're acting a little strange. What's going on?" Her tone was the kind that would make any 5-year-old caught sneaking candy feel guilty. I tried to dodge the question, making jokes and deflecting. "Oh, it's nothing, Mom. Just work, But as soon as I said it, I realized I was sick of playing this game. It was tearing me up inside. How could I look at Tom and pretend he was still the same golden boy when I knew who he really was? Eventually, my patience snapped. I took a deep breath, looked right at them, and said, "Doesn't anything seem off to you? Have you ever wondered who your perfect son really is? You should have seen their faces." Mom went pale, and Dad sat there like he'd been struck by lightning. Tom, of course, instantly went into defense mode. He looked at me with an expression that, honestly, if he had a laser gaze, I'd have been fried on the spot. "Alex, cut it out!" he hissed through his teeth. But it was too late. They'd seen his reaction, saw him tense up. His entire image of the flawless son was cracking. I knew there'd be no going back. I barely got home and had a moment to calm down after that dinner when Tom showed up at my door, practically radiating anger. He stormed in like a hurricane, eyes blazing, fists clenched. And that's when the show began. "Do you even realize what you've done?" he shouted, barely inside the doorway. "You've ruined my life, brother. Thank you very much." At that, I felt my own anger boiling over. "Oh, so I'm the one who ruined his life, huh?" I looked at him, as calmly as I could manage, and said, "You know what, Tom? I didn't do this. It's your messed up secrets that you tried to hide. You destroyed your own life. You just didn't want to face it." He looked at me like I'd just betrayed him, like I was the villain who'd decided to wreck his image. He started blaming me, saying I'd set him up, that if people found out, he'd lose everything he had. And of course, I was the one to blame. A real comedy act, honestly. "You really think that after everything I found out, I'd just keep quiet?" I snapped, losing my cool. "People got hurt because of your actions, Tom. This isn't just some little mistake. It's serious stuff, and you know it. From that moment on, our conversation turned into a full-blown shouting match. He tried to accuse me of everything under the sun, yelling that I was jealous of his success, that I'd always hated how he was the center of attention. I just smirked. Oh yeah, Tom. My whole life has been about envying your perfection. At that point, I knew I'd never see him the same way again. After another wave of back-and-forth accusations, he finally stormed out, slamming the door so hard it felt like the walls would crack. I was left alone, with this heavy feeling inside. Sure, I did what I thought was right, but somehow that didn't make the pain any easier to bear. Family harmony? Forget it. After everything that happened, our family felt more like a battlefield than a place of love and understanding. My parents, who'd always considered Tom a model in everything, distanced themselves from him as if he were a walking disaster. And who could blame them? My brother, their pride, turned out to be someone entirely different from who they thought he was. This new reality hit us all hard. Our usual family dinners? Now they felt more like drawn-out tense meetings with an atmosphere like a courtroom. Mom would glare at Tom from under her brow, and Dad just sat there, silent and grim. And Tom? Oh, he wasn't giving up easily. He kept trying to explain that things weren't as bad as they seemed, that he had everything under control. But it was clear he didn't understand that his words no longer held any weight. His trust was shattered, and no words could fix that. I didn't know whether to feel satisfied or regretful. On one hand, I was the guy who exposed a two-faced family member. You know, the hero who revealed the truth and finally brought order. But on the other hand, it was painful to realize that I was the one who'd shattered this illusion of a perfect family, broken it into pieces. I was a hero and a traitor at the same time, and that just made everything worse. With each passing day, I realized that my relationship with Tom would never go back to the way it was. It was as if a dark line had been drawn between us, dividing us. Not long ago we were brothers, sharing all these family rituals, but now it all felt like an empty shell. Some time passed, and you know how it all ended? Tom decided to leave, to run away, say goodbye to everyone, and just disappear, as if he could walk away from all of this mess. He didn't even say where he was going, just packed his things and vanished. For our parents, it was a massive blow. They used to practically want to put his face on a poster. Family pride and all. Now, they couldn't even stand to hear his name, like he was a dark stain they needed to erase from memory. Honestly, I thought it would bring me some kind of relief. I freed us from the lies, right? I exposed the real Tom. But no. Instead of a sense of victory, there was only emptiness. Inside, everything felt like the aftermath of a storm. Quiet, dark, and no lifeboats on the horizon. Tom, who was once a part of my life, had now become something like a ghost, leaving a permanent mark of bitterness. It felt like my brother had just disappeared, not physically, but emotionally, as if he'd died. And that's when I realized, you can be right and still feel miserable. Cassie was always the perfect example for everyone. But what I accidentally uncovered about her perfect life turned out to be darker than any night. The secrets she was hiding have put our family in danger, and now there's no turning back. Ready to see what a real family hell looks like? My name's Danny, I'm 23, and in our family, everything's under control, as they say. You know that picture-perfect family where conflicts are like the dandruff shampoo in the bathroom. You've heard about it, but we never actually use it. My sister Cassie, who's only a couple of years older, has always been the one everyone sets as an example. You two are like two halves of the same whole, our parents would say at every family gathering, winking as if it wasn't the most cliché line in human history. That was, of course, until one particular day. I almost happened to, find her diary. It was lying there on the table, as if it were left out on purpose, practically begging to be opened. Honestly, I thought I'd find cute notes about the sweetest cat in the neighborhood, or maybe that she wanted to learn to play guitar. Right, of course. But the moment I turned those first pages, everything I thought I knew about her went straight out the window. Right on the very first page, She wrote about midnight phone calls. Dude, midnight phone calls. And not to mom or grandma. These calls were from someone she called Sam. And just hearing that name already set off an alarm bell. And it only got weirder from there. The diary pages were full of strange hints about secret meetings, cryptic messages, and stuff about her interactions with people who clearly weren't part of our family friend circle. Honestly, as I flipped through, all I could think was, "Dear sister, are you even who you say you are?" On the outside, Cassie was always that girl. You know, the classic superstar that everyone flocks to. Her life seemed perfect. Shining hair that could put shampoo commercials to shame, a smile that could melt anyone, and a confidence that seemed straight out of a glossy magazine. Neighbors adored her, friends worshipped her, and our parents looked at her as if she were the golden trophy of their parenting success. Seriously, if there were an award for most perfect sister, Cassie would be the undefeated champ. But her diary? Oh, that was a completely different Cassie. The one writing those entries was nothing like the angel everyone thought they knew. It read like a plot for some kind of intense thriller. Secret meetings? Check. Strange midnight calls? Absolutely. And most interestingly, someone named Sam, who seemed to be controlling her every move. I mean, it was like she was leaving a trail of clues saying, "Stay tuned for what happens next." I kept reading, page by page, feeling more and more flipped upside down inside. I thought I knew my sister like the back of my hand. But it turns out her life was like a movie I was watching for the first time. And with each page, more questions piled up. Who was this Sam? What were these meetings? And most importantly, how on earth had she managed to keep all this hidden for so long? Naturally, I couldn't just let it go. I decided to start my own little investigation. I mean, what else could I do? At first, I thought maybe it was just school pranks or something, but the more I found out, the more I realized that there was definitely something serious going on here. The deeper I dug, the worse things got. You know that feeling when you find a strange box in someone's closet and think, maybe it's better if I don't know what's inside? Yeah, this was just like that, except with my own sister's life. I started talking to her friends. I went about it casually like, "Hey, how's Cassie? Everything all good with her?" And that's when the real detective drama started. One of her friends, Josh, came right out and said he'd noticed something really off about her. He mentioned seeing her with some people who, to put it mildly, were far from upstanding citizens. But the creepiest part? None of her friends could believe that this was actually her. Listening to them, I felt like I was standing at the edge of something terrifying. One of them muttered, "She just doesn't seem like herself anymore." And honestly, that gave me chills. Imagine that your own sister, the person you shared childhood arguments and secrets with, suddenly becomes part of some shady underground circle. Every hint pointed to the idea that Cassie might be involved in something. Well, definitely not legal. The more I tried to find out, the less I actually wanted to know. Every answer only brought up more questions. How? When? Why? And with each step, with every new detail, I realized this path led straight into a dark abyss, one that I'd probably be better off not looking into at all. I couldn't take the mystery any longer, so I gathered my nerve and went straight to Cassie, starting the conversation right at the doorway. I was sure I could get her to come clean. But what I wasn't expecting was to see her expression change instantly, from her usual "butter wouldn't melt" look to "what do you even want from me?" Listen, Cassie, cut the act. I know everything. The midnight calls, those shady friends of yours. Is this some new level of your social life? I said, trying to give her no room to wiggle out of it. Her first move was classic denial. "You're imagining things." She rolled her eyes, pretending it was all some random nonsense, even tried to laugh, like I'd suggested she enter a stand-up competition. But the longer I pressed, the more nervous this ice princess got. Eventually, I knew I'd stand there all night if I had to until she finally cracked. Then, at one point, she exhaled, sat down, and gave me a look that said it all. Exhaustion. Quiet desperation. "All right. You want the truth? Fine, here it is," she threw out with a strange kind of defiance. It turned out that her perfect life was a total facade. All of it. Her success, her independence. Just a cover. She was tangled up in things I couldn't have dreamed of, not even in my worst nightmares. She was being kept on a tight leash, and this Sam I'd heard about? He wasn't just a friend, but someone who controlled her life, practically down to the minute. I sat there, stunned, taking it all in. Inside, I was boiling with a mix of anger and helplessness. She's my sister, and I can't just abandon her. But her life hasn't been her own for a long time now. My nerves were shot. Worrying about Cassie kept me up at night, and every time our parents asked questions about her, I could barely stop myself from spilling the whole truth. But eventually, I realized that staying silent was just a coward's way out. If I truly wanted to help Cassie get out of this mess, I'd have to bring in the heavy artillery, our parents. They had already noticed how tense I was, so naturally, they started pressing me with questions. "Danny, what's going on with you?" Mom asked, her brows furrowed like this was supposed to be the ultimate incentive to open up. I looked at them and knew that if I didn't say everything right now, I'd regret it for the rest of my life. "Listen, Mom, Dad, I think it's time you knew some things about Cassie." I took a deep breath, bracing myself for their shock. When I finished, they sat there as if the ground had been pulled out from under them. Their sweet, perfect daughter turned out to be someone they didn't know at all. Mom immediately clutched her heart, and Dad, his invisible thread of control over the situation, which he had no choice but to break, because this situation was way beyond control. Then Cassie burst into the room, realizing I'd told them everything. To say she was furious would be an understatement. She gave me a look that could have cut through concrete. "How could you? You betrayed me. You just threw me under the bus." I didn't look away, even though I was shaking inside. I knew she hated me right now, but I also knew that if I didn't speak up, any chance to save her would be gone. "Cassie, this isn't betrayal. It's an attempt to save you, even if you don't understand that right now." She stormed out of the room, leaving our parents sitting there in a daze. After our conversation, Cassie was angrier than I'd ever seen her. But like it or not, she finally understood that her game had gone way too far, and there was no backing out now. At some point, between waves of rage and fear, she realized she'd either break free from this web or lose everything. And finally, she made a decision: to try to cut all ties with these shady people who seemed to be pulling her strings. But it turned out that leaving this elite club was a lot harder than signing up for it. As soon as she tried to pull away from these people, they started gently reminding her that they knew exactly where we lived. Her family. Basically, if she thought she could just walk away, she was sorely mistaken. One evening, I saw her at home, quiet, pale, as if her whole world had collapsed. She didn't even try to pretend everything was fine. "Danny, they're not going to just let me go," she muttered, staring at the floor. It felt like every move she made only tightened this knot. And now it wasn't just her in danger, but our whole family. That's when I realized. Sitting around and watching as everything went to hell was no longer an option. I had to pull myself together and figure out a way to get us out of this mess, because if I didn't do something now, we'd all end up paying for her mistakes, and I could barely imagine what that might look like. The situation hit its peak. One evening, just when I thought things couldn't get any worse, they showed up at our door. 3 guys who looked like they'd stepped straight out of some low-budget action movie. One of them, a big guy with a stone-cold expression, knocked so hard it shook the walls, and I knew right away. This wasn't a package delivery. Cassie went white as a sheet the moment she saw them. It was obvious. These were the friends from that dark corner of her life. I opened the door slightly, trying to appear calmer than I actually felt. "We're here for Cassie. She knows what she's supposed to do," muttered one of them in a voice loud enough that even the neighbors could probably hear. Another guy, smirking, added, "And if she doesn't get it quickly, well, there'll be consequences. You know what I mean." Honestly, in that moment I had the urge to run as far as I could, but I knew that if I didn't intervene, everything would go down the drain. Cassie, pressed against the wall, tried to say something, but the words were frozen by fear. I stepped between her and these visitors and said, "Look, Whatever you need from her, it's not worth terrorizing her family. Sure, it sounded weak, but what else could I do? The leader of the trio just smirked. She made a promise, and now she's going to have to follow through. Or, we'll have to handle things differently. He sneered, making no attempt to hide the threat. I knew that if we didn't cut ties with these people right then and there, they wouldn't just disappear from our lives. They'd turn it into a living nightmare. This was a fight not only for her freedom, but for our future. After all that drama and everything we'd endured, it was like Cassie had finally returned to us. It sounds too simple, but really, that's what it felt like. The old ties were cut, the threats no longer knocked on our door, and we thought we could finally breathe. But you know that feeling when it's all supposedly over, yet you feel even more afraid than before? That was it. Cassie wasn't the same person she'd been before all this. And I don't mean some dramatic transformation, like she'd rethought her life. No, it was more subtle. Her gaze had changed, her habits, the way she spoke. She was constantly on edge, always tense, as if she were living with the expectation that any moment, everything could collapse back into chaos. She'd come home, but the Cassie we'd known no longer existed. For our parents, it was a shock too. They kept saying we had to put it all behind us, but honestly, even they couldn't pretend nothing had happened. It was like our family had lost that sense of ease we thought could never be broken. I realized that the simple faith we'd had in each other was just gone, evaporated, like mist after rain. We knew too much darkness about each other to ever be the same as we were. Cassie tried to return to a normal life, but I could see she was still carrying the weight of her past with her. We all tried to move on, but it was a fresh start burdened by heavy losses.